Here at Leven Online Radio, we don't just talk to local people, important though that is, we go after the big names as well. And in this season of Lent, when some of us are trying to resist various kinds of temptation, who could be bigger than the tempter himself, the man downstairs, Old Nick? Through our extensive networks, we were able to make contact with the nether regions and secure an exclusive interview with Satan himself, which you are about to hear. Now, his take on history might be a little suspect, but then he's not exactly noted for his impartiality and faithfulness to the facts. Satan, welcome to Leven Online Radio. I'm not exactly pleased to see you, but I am a little intrigued.
Intrigued will do, and thank you.
Now, we've been over the ground rules. No filthy language, no trying to possess anyone.
Yes, I'll behave myself.
I don't know if I can trust you, but let's see. I wanted to start with something seasonal. It's the beginning of Lent, when Christians remember how you tempted Jesus in the wilderness.
Do you have to bring that up?
Well, why not? You don't appear on centre stage all that much in the Bible, but there you are, early on in the Gospels.
And I messed up, didn't I? 3 attempts, 3 failures. Not what you call covering yourself in glory.
But do you think you picked the right temptations?
How do you mean?
Well, was there any serious likelihood he'd succumb? You weren't exactly subtle.
I thought I'd win in round 1. He'd been in that wilderness how long?
40 days.
I don't think so. He'd have been dead. 40 days is a figure of speech for quite some time. But he was ravenous, believe me. Turn the stones into bread, I said. Problem sorted.
Could he really have done that? Just waved a wand and abracadabra?
Interesting question. People believed he could. Maybe he believed he could. But if he'd actually tried, I'd have had him whatever the outcome. If he'd failed, I'd have laughed in his face. But if he'd succeeded, I would then... I'd have then said, "You selfish man, you can do a conjuring trick when you're hungry, but there are people starving all the time, and you don't wave a wand for them." He saw me coming and didn't even try. Fobbed me off with some random verse of scripture.
And he wouldn't jump off a high tower either for similar reasons.
Temptation number 2 was a bit different. I was trying to sell him the idea of using gimmicks to promote his message.
But you didn't want him to promote his message.
I didn't particularly want him not to starve. That isn't the point. If someone uses gimmicks, those are what you remember, not what they actually say. He wasn't falling for that one either. No pun intended.
And if he had jumped off a tower, the angels might have caught him at the bottom, or they might not. Since at that point he would have been taking your advice, they might not have wanted to rescue him. Splat, end of story.
No, it was worth a try.
But temptation number 3 was never going to work. Worship me and you can have all the kingdoms of the world. Why should he even think of worshipping you? You were diametric opposites.
If I had been in his sandals, I'd have been tempted. Anyway, we're not so unalike. We both wanted to rule the world. We just have different ways of going about it. We could have been a great partnership.
At this point, I need to remind listeners that my guest today, Satan, is sometimes known as the father of lies.
He thought about it, I'm telling you.
I'm afraid I don't believe you. Anyway, it still didn't work.
All right. So I should have been more cunning. At least he got himself killed.
But that wasn't the end of it. There was the resurrection.
Apparently.
So, with hindsight, what would your last temptation have been?
I'd have tried. Keep well away from Jerusalem. It's dangerous there. Your enemies will be gathered in strength. You could get yourself crucified. Why not build up your movement in the countryside where you're safe? Take years over it and die peacefully in your bed.
And would that have been tempting?
You'd think. Remember what happened when I got Simon Peter to try that line?
Remind me.
Jesus shouted at him, "Get behind me, Satan!" He'd rumbled me by that stage. I could have gone on about getting married to Mary Magdalene and having children with her.
Do you think he fancied her?
Being realistic, she was out of his league.
Hang on, she was out of his league?
He was from a poor family with questions about who his father was. She was a wealthy woman, gave money to his cause, and that was as far as it went.
I thought she was a prostitute.
Different Mary. She might have fancied him. He might have fancied her. But he was married to his cause, and she respected that, more's the pity. Those two had complete integrity. It makes me sick.
And he always planned to go to Jerusalem, didn't he? I mean, if you don't confront the authorities, try to get change things at the seat of power, your movement will probably die with you, which is what you wanted.
Exactly. But you'd think the prospect of being crucified would scare him off. It's pretty vicious, even by my standards.
So, could you have tempted him? I mean, successfully?
Maybe not, which is why I've learnt from that and concentrated more on corrupting his followers. With some of them, it's been like falling off a log.
Well, charming.
Oh, don't mention it.
What was your greatest success? The Spanish Inquisition?
Oh, in my top 10, certainly.
The Crusades?
Oh boy, they cast a long shadow, don't they? Keep guessing, this is fun.
The 30 Years' War?
Nice one. 8 million killed in the fighting, plenty more by famine and disease. But whose fault was it?
Oh, not sure. Catholics? The Protestants?
The fact that there were Protestants as opposed to Catholics. Now, suppose there had just been the Church.
Oh, I get you.
No Reformation, no 30 Years' War.
Oh, you're not laying claim to the Reformation.
If any religious man in history has blood on his hands, it's Martin Luther. There was a real danger at that point that the Church might see the error of its ways and reform, become enlightened. I couldn't let that happen. Luther was putty in my hands. I could work with his intellectual arrogance, with his German nationalism, with his anti-Semitism, with his libido.
Hang on. The man was a saint.
He had a few unfortunate virtues, that's true. And I also needed to make sure that the Church mishandled him, which it did. So they chucked him out, and from that moment the lovely rot set in. Protestantism has always thrived on splits and silly arguments, whereas Rome got pushed back into this authoritarian, pseudo-imperialist mode that made it drag its feet on every kind of progress to this day.
I've never looked at it quite like that. You sure you're not spinning me a yarn?
Would I do that?
Yes, you would.
Well, maybe. But look at Luther's legacy. He split the church once. Protestantism has split 1,000 times. He upheld the Bible as the supreme authority, and that gave us American fundamentalism. He didn't much care for the Jews, and there's a line that runs from him through Wagner to Auschwitz. Had there been no Reformation, Fountains, Rievaulx, Whitby Abbey and so on would still be intact. There'd be a united Ireland. The list goes on.
I still think you're trying to pull a fast one.
You brush up on your history. Look, I need to go. The cabinet is due to meet any time.
The cabinet?
I never miss a meeting if I can help it, whoever's in power. But it's fun at the moment.
If you really think I'm going to...
Nice being on the show. Another time I'll tell you about my latest plans. Well, some of them. Bye!
And that was Satan, the Prince of Darkness, here at Leven Online Radio. It's Leven Online Radio. Don't say we didn't warn you. Satan can, of course, take on any disguise he chooses, and it's strange that his voice in that interview sounds remarkably like that of Hutton Rugby Amdram's very own Dave McCasey, but that must be coincidence. Anyway, Dave would never leave the studio stinking of sulphur. We had to fumigate the room before we dared invite anyone else in. For Leven Online Radio, I'm Richard Bradshaw.